When Jimmy John Liautaud opened his first sandwich shop in 1983 in a garage in Charleston, Illinois, he was 19 years old and his father had given him a choice: join the military or start a business. His father would loan him $25,000 either way. He chose the sandwich business. By the time he sold his majority stake in Jimmy John's to a private equity firm in 2019, the chain had grown to over 2,800 locations. He had become a billionaire. The brand was one of the most recognized sandwich franchises in America, known for its freaky fast delivery, its simple menu, and its aggressive expansion. The story of how it got there is not the story that the marketing tells. It is a story about a franchise model that prioritized fee collection and rapid expansion over franchisee success, about support systems that left owners to figure out problems on their own, about legal agreements so aggressive that minimum wage sandwich workers were prevented from taking jobs at competing restaurants, and about what happens when a private equity firm acquires a franchise system and optimizes it for returns rather than for the health of the franchise network. Jimmy John's franchising model is, on paper, straightforward. You pay an initial franchise fee, approximately $35,000. You find a location, sign a lease, build out the store according to Jimmy John's specifications, hire staff, and open. You pay ongoing royalties of 6% of gross sales plus a 4.5% marketing fund contribution. Total investment to open a Jimmy John's location runs between $330,000 and $650,000, depending on the market. For that investment, you receive the right to use the Jimmy John's brand, access to their supply chain, training for yourself and your managers, and ongoing support from the franchisor. That is how the franchise agreement describes it. Here is how some franchise owners have described the actual experience. The training, multiple franchise owners have reported, was shorter and less comprehensive than they expected. The ongoing support, many have said, was difficult to access when problems arose. When equipment failed, when a supplier had issues, when a location struggled, the corporate support that the franchise agreement implied was available was, in practice, harder to get than anticipated. And then there were the trailers. Multiple Jimmy John's franchise owners have reported that when their store equipment and supplies arrived, the beginning of their hundreds of thousands of dollar investment in their franchise, it arrived in a trailer, dropped off. Sometimes with minimal guidance on setup, installation, or the operational specifics of getting the store ready to open. Owners who expected a structured opening process with hands-on corporate support found themselves navigating the setup of a commercial food operation with less help than they'd been led to expect. This is not unique to Jimmy John's. Many franchise systems have been criticized for what is called front-loading, emphasis on selling franchise agreements and collecting fees, with less attention to the ongoing success of franchise owners. But Jimmy John's controversies went beyond support failures.
First, I figured out that I could work from 8 in the morning until 2:30 in the morning. That was the start. And then by the time August came around, I knew what I wanted my manager to do. And so I hired Tyler. He passed this lie detector test, and I liked the kid. So I hired him.
I just answered an ad in the newspaper, went in there, and there's this guy, and he's just got his shorts.
It was going to be a rock star deal, so I just wanted to go do it.
In 2014, a story broke that brought national attention to Jimmy John's.
Over a week since the new Jimmy John's restaurant opened in the Elmwood Village, and the owner says he isn't getting a warm welcome. He says neighbors don't want a corporate chain on a street full of mom and pop shops. Now they're letting their opinions known.
in a way the company did not welcome. It was about their non-compete clause. Non-compete agreements in employment contracts are common in certain industries: technology, finance, senior management. The rationale is that employees with access to proprietary information or trade secrets should be restricted from immediately joining competitors. Jimmy John's non-compete clause applied to sandwich makers, to delivery drivers, to minimum wage employees who made sandwiches and delivered them on bicycles. The clause, as reported in 2014, prohibited employees from working for any restaurant that derived more than 10% of its revenue from sandwiches for a period of 2 years after leaving Jimmy John's and within 3 miles of any Jimmy John's location. 3 miles of any Jimmy John's location. In dense urban markets, Jimmy John's had locations throughout the city. 3 miles of any location could effectively cover an entire metropolitan area. A minimum wage sandwich worker at Jimmy John's under this agreement could potentially be prohibited from working at Subway, Quiznos, Panera, or any number of other restaurants for 2 years after leaving Jimmy John's. The backlash was significant. State attorneys general in multiple states investigated. Several states determined the clauses were unenforceable. Jimmy John's eventually stopped including the clause in new employment agreements. But the story revealed something important about the culture of a company that would put that kind of restrictive language in a minimum wage employee's contract. The non-compete story intersected with Jimmy John's broader labor practices, which had been the subject of worker organizing and criticism. The founder's personal views on employee compensation were documented in statements that received significant media attention. Jimmy Liautaud himself became a source of controversy when he was photographed on hunting trips that generated public outcry. His political donations and public statements created brand controversy that franchise owners, who had no control over the founder's personal conduct, had to navigate with their local customers. This is one of the underappreciated risks of franchise ownership. You are not just buying a business model, you are buying association with a brand. And that brand is controlled by people whose decisions you have no vote in. When the founder of your franchise does something that generates national controversy, your customers bring it to your counter. Your Yelp reviews reflect it. Your sales feel it. And the franchise agreement you signed gives you no recourse. In 2019, Jimmy Liautaud sold a majority stake in Jimmy John's to Inspire Brands, a private equity-backed restaurant holding company that also owns Arby's, Buffalo Wild Wings, Sonic, and Dunkin'. Private equity acquisition of franchise systems is a pattern we've covered on this channel. And the pattern tends to follow a predictable trajectory. The acquiring firm pays a significant premium for the brand. To justify that premium and generate returns for their investors, they focus on cost reduction, revenue optimization, and in the case of franchise systems, extracting maximum value from the franchise network. For franchise owners, this typically means increased pressure on performance metrics, changes to supply chain requirements, new technology mandates that franchisees must pay for, and ongoing fee structures that benefit the franchisor. It does not typically mean increased support for struggling franchise owners. Since the Inspire Brands acquisition, Jimmy John's has continued operating under its established model. The brand has neither collapsed nor dramatically transformed, but the franchise owners who signed agreements before the private equity era are now operating under a corporate parent whose primary obligation is to its investors rather than to the health of the franchise network. I want to be clear about what Jimmy John's is and what it isn't. It is not a fraud in the traditional sense. The sandwiches are real. The stores operate. Many franchise owners have made money. But the pattern of complaints from franchise owners, inadequate support, the trailer delivery experiences, the non-compete overreach, the conduct of leadership creating brand risk, describes a franchise system that prioritizes selling franchise agreements and collecting fees over building a support infrastructure that gave franchise owners a genuine shot at success. That is the Jimmy John's model, and it is the model of a significant portion of the franchise industry. The Franchise Disclosure Document, the FDD, that every franchisor must provide to prospective franchisees contains financial performance representations. It shows average unit volumes. It shows item 19 financial performance data. What it cannot show you is what it actually feels like when your equipment arrives in a trailer and you're on your own, figuring out how to open a commercial food operation. What it cannot show you is how much support you'll actually receive when things go wrong. What it cannot show you is whether the founder will do something that brings a national controversy to a brand you've invested your life savings in. Before you buy any franchise, talk to existing owners, not the ones the company refers you to. Find owners on your own. Ask them if they do it again. Ask them what surprised them. Ask them what they wish they'd known. The Franchise Disclosure Document tells you what the company is required to tell you. The owners tell you the truth. Next week on Coffin Ledger, we're going back to the medical world. The cancer doctor who diagnosed healthy patients with cancer and gave them chemotherapy they didn't need. Farid Fatah and the most deliberate medical fraud in American history. Subscribe. Share this. Every industry has a coffin. We track what killed them. This is Coffin Ledger.